I struggled with binge eating for 3 years, but I can confidently say now that I feel free around food, I make good decisions, and I feel happy within my body. In this video, I want to share with you a technique to end this endless cycle of frustration for you incredibly quickly. So when I was living in the UK with my parents at home, one of the things that will sound super trivial, and I'll explain in a minute how you can stop this from happening, but I would go into the kitchen and have so many thoughts in my head that would say, go and eat or have a snack. I live in an Indian household at home. If you're aware of what Indian households are like, there are snacks everywhere. We actually go to Kenya, and when we go to Kenya, we put in this massive order to a snacks company of 20 kilos of these Indian snacks. It's a company called Royal Snacks. They have fried crisps and variations of this kind of thing, nuts, all of this stuff. And so when we come back from Kenya, we just have hordes and hordes of all of these snacks. In the Indian culture, it's quite common that you gift snacks to each other. So my brother's girlfriend's mum would sometimes give us some food, and it all tastes great, don't get me wrong. All this food would just be on the table, literally outside or in the cupboard, which is pretty accessible. I'm going to explain why this is super important in a minute. And so I'd have these thoughts and these urges to have these binges, and a lot of the time I'd be able to maintain the discipline to refrain from having the snack, or I'd stick to my system of fasting until 10 and then having my first meal and keeping that regimented structure. But on a day that I feel a little bit stressed, or on a day that I was filming especially, I used to find it super I would avoid that discomfort of filming or doing the thing that I needed to do and using food as a source of comfort. And so what I'm going to share in a minute is actually how you can stop these urges from happening, because I don't have these urges anymore. I think there's a real powerful way that you can do this, whether in your home or doing something like I've done, which I'm going to share, to reduce the amount of these urges from happening so that you don't have to exercise so much willpower. But before that, let me share you a story from the Vietnam War. American soldiers went to Vietnam to fight in the war, but the conditions were pretty bad, like really bad conditions. These guys were staying in the worst places. From what I've read online, it was really bad conditions and really uncomfortable. But heroin was super available in Vietnam, and a lot of these American soldiers got addicted to heroin. And when they got addicted to heroin, people in America were pretty worried, because if you don't know, the success rate for people coming out of rehab, so not just people like getting addicted to heroin and then becoming unaddicted, the success rate for people coming out of rehab for heroin is 10%. So people go in with a heroin addiction into rehab, and only 10% come out and end up staying off heroin. And so that's really low, like 90% of people end up relapsing. And so people thought that all of these soldiers that have gone to Vietnam to fight in the war, who are super addicted to heroin, will come back and just stay addictive, and there would be this massive problem in the US. But then what happened afterwards is only 10% of people, of the soldiers that were having heroin in Vietnam, stayed addicted in the US. And so that's a complete flip to the statistics there. And the reason why is because they changed their location. They changed the place they were in, and I'm going to explain, because obviously you're going to be thinking in your head, I can't just go abroad. I'm going to explain how you can engineer this kind of change in your environment in a minute. But just by changing their environment, changing their country, they removed all these triggers and these cues, almost like I had when I was going into the kitchen of having this food. They just removed the triggers and they removed the cues, and as a result of that, they didn't have the craving to have the heroin. So I'm going to explain how you can apply this same principle of changing your environment to your life, so that instead of fighting the cravings every single day, just not have the cravings in the first place, or reduce them anyway. There are 4 levels to this, and each level becomes easier and easier to implement into your daily life. But the first level is probably the most powerful one, and it's something that I've done recently, is I've moved to Bali. But every time that I've moved country, I've been able to redefine myself. So in July 2019, I went to Colombia for 8 weeks. And in that trip, I was all on my own. I joined a group of other people that I'd never met before, and ended up making friends on that trip. And I really was able to become this person that I'd never been before, and redefined who I am. And so even if you are going just for a 2-month trip or 1-month trip alone, you're going to be able to redefine who you are so that when you come back, you can have a little bit more resilience, you can have a little bit more maybe sense of confidence around food because you've spent time away from the stressful situations that occur in the UK. But if you can, even just moving abroad for 3 months, 6 months is going to be super powerful because in that time you can really focus in on building these good habits and you can set up the place that you're living so that there isn't all this food available. Maybe if you have food available right now at your home, I'm going to explain how, if you are in that situation, what you can do right now to stop having the urges in a minute. But if you move abroad, you just eradicate them completely. Like right now, I'm living in Bali. I'm living in this really nice guest house, but I don't really buy food because the food is pretty cheap here. And so even if I want to have something, like it's just not there. I have to go onto Gojek, which is like the food delivery app here, and I have to order it, which adds a massive amount of friction to me actually making that step and adding that food. And the point here is that, okay, like for these 6 months, I'm gonna maybe be protected and not have these urges. But then when I go back, you're gonna be like, oh, you're gonna have these urges again. But no, because every day that I eat in a way that makes me feel happy, I feel in control, is a day that I build the evidence towards the belief that I am this person. And as we change our beliefs, we end up becoming this new person. When I go back, I'm gonna feel like I'm the person that I've created here. And so even if you can't move away for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, even if you can go for a week or 2 weeks or however long you can go, if you can go alone, it's a great way to redefine who you think you are and become that person that you want to be. And that in itself will reduce the amount of urges that you have. The second level to this is within the city that you're in is to move flat or move house, move across town, because this is still a great opportunity to build new routines into your life and again, redefine yourself, but to less of an extent because you still might have to hang around with the same people, and obviously around the same people, these cues of people end up triggering behavioral responses. And so it's not going to be such a drastic change in the amount of urges that you have from moving abroad, somewhere that you've never been before or you've only visited before, but it's still powerful. So I moved to Tooting last year, and for me, it was great because I was able to set up this routine of eating at the same time every single day. I didn't really buy trigger foods into my house, so then I had control over my environment there. And so just that move going from my house in Bushy to Tooting give me that space to build my own routines around food. And I think this is super powerful if you're living with your parents where, look, like they're gonna buy what they want. And I think it's completely fair for them to do that. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they shouldn't buy this, and I don't think you should create tension with your parents about buying this type of food, but it just means that because they're buying it and you're struggling with it, you've got to make decisions that align with who you want to be. And what I'm going to share next is actually going to allow you to navigate this situation where you are maybe stuck at home or you have to stay at home. But if you can move across town, it feels like maybe a bit of a refresh and a restart. You can organize your kitchen in a way that the foods that trigger you are a little bit further away, or you can set up systems in your life where food isn't as available and those urges aren't as frequent, and so you end up binging less. All right, level 3 is to change your routine. One of the things for me was that when I was working at the office, I would have fewer urges than having when I was working from home. But obviously, when I started working from home more because of COVID and stuff, I was there and it was around all this food. And so the point here is that just because you are maybe working online or working from home doesn't mean you actually have to keep that as your place to work. And if you find that being at home alone is causing you to overeat excessively, then maybe thinking about changing your routine so that you spend more time outside of the house and you have somewhere to go will help you in reducing those urges. Because for me, and I'll be completely honest, like when I was at home and I was working from home every single day, the urges would just get more and more because I think it was probably partly because of boredom, maybe partly because of stress, a few different things going on there. And this is the thing with binge eating, it's like a multifaceted issue. It's not like something that is like clear cut. It's very psychological and there's a lot of different competing components to it. So it's not black and white, there's a lot of nuance to it. But when I was working from home all day, the urges were higher, and what I could have done, which I probably should have done, and if I go back now, which I'll probably do a lot more, is like 2-3 days a week, just go to work from Costa Coffee or Starbucks or whatever it is, because when you do that, you're basically just removing yourself from the environment that's causing yourself to binge. And changing that routine doesn't have to be you working from somewhere else, but I know one of my clients, he struggles sometimes with getting food on the way home from the station or the bus station, and he goes to the newsagents and might get some snacks. And one thing that you can do is change the way that you walk home, because remember that you've created an association with walking past this shop and buying the snack. And instead of trying to exercise willpower or discipline every single time that you walk past the shop, just change the route so you don't walk past the shop, and so you don't have that triggering moment. And so even small things like that, I think, can be super powerful in reducing the amount of triggers that you have in order to stop yourself from excessively overeating. And level 4 is to change your environment at home. So I think friction is one of the most underrated productivity hacks that people can use. So I'll give you an example. So I have this tripod that you're sitting on right now, and every single day I'm doing a challenge called 75 Hard. And every single day I have to put my camera on the tripod and take a progress photo of my body. Things are going well, by the way. But every morning I would have my phone laying on this table here, and the tripod, I don't know, in the corner of the room or whatever. And I would wake up, my alarm would go off, and then I would just lay in bed, because in that moment, I would think to myself, oh, I can't be asked to set up the phone on my tripod. And that little bit of friction would keep me laying in bed way longer than I wanted to lay in bed. And so what I did was I put my phone onto the tripod overnight, and I let my phone charge whilst I'm sleeping, whilst on the tripod. And that little change in friction, and I'll explain in a minute how you can do this in your house, made me get out of bed way quicker, because I didn't have to fumble around with my phone on the tripod. And if you can add friction between yourself and the trigger foods, or the foods that make you want to excessively overeat, it's going to stop you from mindlessly snacking. So like, one of the things that I did at home, we have this box of cashews. So my dad loves air frying cashews with salt and pepper. They're super tasty, but for me, cashews are super moreish. Like, I can eat them for days. And so we have this like ice cream tub, the Walls ice cream tub of cashews on this table. And I work from home, and it's so easy to just go in there, grab a few, and like, cashews calories can add up very quickly. And so I have this other big peanut butter tub. And so what I did is I put the peanut butter tub on the cashews tub. And so there's that little bit of friction. I have to actually take the peanut butter tub off the cashews tub to get the cashews out. And as a result of that added bit of friction, every time that I went over to the cashews, I would have to think twice about opening it, because I'd have to take the peanut butter tub off the cashew tub. And so these are things that you can do in your house, where if you find yourself having snacks at night, or you find yourself excessively overeating, how can you add friction between yourself and these snacks so that they're less available, so that you end up less likely to going for them, because you have to take a pause between you making that impulsive decision to consuming it. Because when you make that pause and you think to yourself, do I really need this? In that moment, you've already won. So that's it, 4 levels to change your environment, to reduce the urges so much that you stop binge eating. I hope it helps. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a comment below if you found it helpful. And remember, become the person that you want to be. Peace.